Hello everybody, it's Stephen here for the Idiot Quilter, and so Chatty and Walter, of course, as well. Say hello, Walter.
Hello.
Walter. Okay.
So what am I? Am I the idiot apparel maker?
Yeah, I guess so. Or jackass, I don't know. Whichever you pick. I have a lot of names for you. Some are complimentary. Not. Anyways, welcome to episode 19 of So Chatty for July the 30th, 2021. And okay, we were struggling this week for a topic. Thank you so much for sending them in. We really appreciate it. Footnote, this is sarcasm, okay? But no, seriously, we are running out of topics. And, you know, well, we can always rattle on for days, as you well know, especially if you're viewers of Stephen and Walter Live, about almost anything. But, you know, the whole idea here is to present useful information that you can use, okay? So, you know, if you've got some YouTube channels, we're going to talk about YouTube channels today, and websites that you think are really useful, you use them a lot, send them to us, we'll review them. If you've got stores that I haven't reviewed yet on the Idiot Quilter, send them along. If they have a website, of course, so I can, because, you know, if it's out in Alberta, which no one's going to right now for obvious reasons, you know, we're not going to Alberta, but I mean, I can go anywhere online. Whatever, we're open. So please, 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 don't be shy. Send us something. There's no such thing as a stupid idea. Well, it's not true, but we might be, but you might think it's stupid, but we might be able to translate it into something that's not so stupid. So we're going to start right up. I did get one request this week, but we can't build a whole show around it. And that is how I label my quilts. Now, you know, quilt labeling can be very, very elaborate. Now, I have watched many YouTube channels where they talk about making a huge label where you put your name, the date it was created, the pattern that was used, the fabric that you used, and all kinds of stuff. Write a little story. I made this for my little nephew Johnny, who just got out of the hospital after he got run over by a car. I don't know, all that kind of stuff. Personally, by the time I get to the point where you want to label your quilt, I'm done with it. All it gets is my name and a date, and that's it. And this is how I do it. I do it on my embroidery machine. I made this up in Artistic Digitizer, which is a program for Janome embroidery machines. Actually, it's for any machine will work with it. And it lets you design your own embroidery patterns. So that's what I've done. I've done this, and you see it's just got my name, created by Stephen Bland, and the year. That's all I put, year. And I can make 8 of these at once on my embroidery machine in the hoop. And that's what I do. Now, people talk about sewing these things on, and there's various methods. Some people do a sort of an invisible stitch all the way around the outside of it, only into the backing fabric, not all the way through, of course, because if you've got it quilted on the front and you did that, it would show up. There'd be this big square or rectangle or whatever size of label you're using. Other people, they will take 2 sides of it and put it right into their binding. So this side and the bottom side, if this was down in the bottom corner, are stitched in, and then they just do a light couple of stitches in around the other 2 sides to secure it that way. Some actually cut them as a triangle, and that way they have almost like a little pocket, because 2 of the 3 sides of the triangle get buried in the binding, and then they have this little pocket kind of thing, which you can either sew up or just leave. Too much work. I don't do it, because it's hand sewing in most cases, except with the exception of putting it into your binding. And you know, I've done that a couple of times, but to be honest, I forget all about that while I'm doing the binding, and I go, oh crap, I was going to put that in. So you know what I use? And some of you who are purists are going to hate this. I put steam a seam on the back of it. This one's all ready to go. All I have to do is peel that white paper off it, put it down in the corner bottom of my quilt, press it, it stays. Now, you want to know something? I've not had any of the labels come off yet. Mind you, I haven't washed a lot of them, so not really sure. But I think it's pretty secure for that. I mean, if by chance it comes off in the wash, if I'm washing it, then I will rethink it and sew it on. But
well, actually, what you could do is is just put like what I call a tack stitch, like that's on the corner of your
Yeah.
pockets, right? It's a little stitch that goes in the corner. It would just add a stitch to the end.
Yeah,
of your
true.
quilt,
Could
but
do
it's
that.
it's not as obvious especially if you use a color that's
Yeah,
pretty
the same
close
as
to-
whatever
yeah.
the front of the quilt is. Then you don't have
Yeah.
to. Yeah, I suppose I could do it that way too. So, anyways, this was a question sent to me by Fidel. Fidel is one of our regular viewers. In fact, we did an interview with Fidel, and you can check that out. It'll be in one of my other sections, The Idiot Quilter Presents. And he wanted to know how I do it. So, Fidel, that's how I do it. And you just had an improvement on it by Walter. Of
Yeah,
course
actually,
we did.
the stitch that I have on the corner of the pockets is for reinforcement.
Now,
And it's a little, what they call a little tack stitch.
and now, since he was so kind to give me a very helpful suggestion about my labels, I have a very helpful suggestion about buttons on the shirts he makes.
Oh.
These two shirts are Walter's creations. And I've noticed, I asked him, how do you finish off your buttons? And he says, well, he just stitches them on. But there's little threads come out of the buttons. I'm constantly cutting them off. And I know that eventually one day, the button's just going to drop off, because there is an instruction where you bring the thread that comes out from the front when you're finished, you bring it in back and behind, and you have two tails and you tie them together. Now, it is kind of confusing in the Janome manual that talks about that, but I am sure there are videos. But as long as you just secure the backs, whatever way works, I think it's fine. Now, I haven't had any buttons drop off yet, but
Okay, we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean,
Well, I'm kind of new to sewing, so I was doing I first shirt I did, I tied them all off and stuff, and I noticed that when it does the stitching, it does a tack down stitch in the stitch.
yeah, but there's one thread that comes up
Oh, okay.
for some reason. See that? It's right there.
One, yeah.
Now, I don't know. It may be tacked down underneath, but if I cut it off, it's probably okay. Like, I have been cutting them off, and they have been okay. But
so-
I don't know. So maybe somebody out there will, a very experienced sewer will probably tell us how to get around that or what to do. It's probably very easy. We just haven't looked it up yet. Okay, so that takes us to what we're going to talk about today. And this is our favorite YouTube channels / websites that we go to for things like how do you put a button on, or whatever, or make a label, things like that. So I'm going to start with two, and then we'll switch to Walter, and then we'll go back and forth over this. And everything we're talking about today is in the show notes below. We've linked them all as well, so you can check them out for yourself. Okay. One of my favorite YouTube channels, and it's one that's very, very popular amongst many, many, many people, is the Missouri Star Quilt Company YouTube channel. Jenny Doan gives every week a very quick tutorial on how to make a quilt. And most times she has a free pattern that's linked in the show notes for that YouTube channel, and you can go and get it. She's also does certain special things as well every now and then. On Tuesdays, I think they call it, or is it Thursdays? Triple Play Tuesdays or Triple Play Thursdays, one or the other, starts with a T. And that's where they take the one basic design and make 3 different products using that design, like a pillow, a throw, and maybe a table runner or something like that. They also have Misty Doan, who's one of the daughter-in-laws to Jenny. She does a segment, usually on Tuesdays. She does it live, oftentimes, and she's showing you a technique or a trick. That's the word I want, trick. Or a project that you can make very fast. Also, one of Jenny's daughters, Natalie, I think, has Final Finishes, I think she calls it, where she shows you basic tricks and tips and techniques for finishing off a quilt or a border or something like that. So it's a wealth of information. There's tons of things there. Just one word of caution. The patterns that Jenny posts for the tutorial that she's doing are not good. They are very bare bones. In fact, there's no instructions. It just tells you how much fabric you need. So I guess you get all the rest of it from watching the video. I do find that a little bit annoying. Okay. Now, if you get their block magazine, that's why I was afraid of the first time I got a block magazine, because I knew it was full of patterns. But I thought, are they going to be written this way? because that's not going to help me at all. But they're not. They're very detailed and everything. But just beware of that. And another one that I really like that's Canadian is So Very Easy. This is a lady, Iroquois, who lives in Niagara Falls. She's only about 2 hours away from us. She's been sewing since she was a kid, and she does not just quilts, she does garment sewing as well, although oftentimes when you tune into her tutorials, they will most often be about quilts.
Yeah, with her, I have noticed that she does some apparel stuff as well.
Yeah, she does.
So, yeah, she's a good one she does a really detailed explanation.
And it's very organized, and it's very easy to follow. She also does on Tuesdays, I think she puts out a shorter video where she talks about a technique or a tool. And has some very interesting tools. There's been several times that I have ordered what she has suggested, because I've never heard them before. In fact, you just ordered and got the other day a thing that we saw on her station, which was the sewing gauge.
Oh, I didn't see that on her station.
Well, I told you about it.
Okay.
And she showed how to use it for different things.
Oh, okay. I'll have to take a look at that one.
It's basically a little accordion fold thing with points, and it's meant, I guess, what, to space your buttons?
Like if you've got a space from the top to the bottom of your shirt that you want to put buttons on, you can just, and you want to put in, let's say you want to put an even number of buttons on in the space, you can just pull it out, and it's like a big accordion. So it evenly spaces your buttons out all the way down your shirt easily without having to measure them, or how much space you're going to have to divide into to figure out how to evenly space out your buttons. Not that it's a big deal or hard to do, but it does. I think I haven't used it yet. I think it will make it a little easier to quickly figure that out.
She also showed how, though, you could use it for doing some measurements when you're quilting or when you're piecing a quilt together too. So although it's not really designed specifically for those techniques, she does show you how to use it for that. And it's not a cheap tool. Like you said, you paid how much?
Well, actually, I heard originally from my sewing group that when I first heard about this tool, and they originally told us that we could they only found it at this one store in Quebec, which isn't true. You can find it all over the place.
Well, you can get it on Amazon.
Yeah, well, I can't remember what the price is on Amazon, but at this one store that they found it at, I think they were charging $40 Canadian for it. But I purchased it off Cleaner's Supply, and it was $26.95 Canadian. It is also offered by Cleaner's Supply in the U.S. as, I think it's $17.95 US dollars. So
it's readily available.
Yeah, it's readily available, and I guess it's a reasonable price. Well, like anything, sewing tools, when you get it, you think I paid $26 for that.
But if you can get a lot of uses out of a tool like that, then it's worth the money. You know, it's like when you buy rulers. There's lots of quilts you make, and they have specialty rulers, but they're only good for that particular design of quilt. And you may never make that quilt again. And so there you could spend, $30, $40 on a specialty ruler, and that's the only use you're going to get out of it. But this is called, what we're talking about here with, I think it's the Slim Lines.
No, it's Simflex.
Oh, Simflex.
Simflex. Simflex. Simflex.
Sewing gauge, isn't it?
Sewing gauge, yeah.
We call it sewing gauge. So anyways, that's a little aside. Didn't figure we were going to give an advertisement for that newest little device, but there you have it. Bonus, no extra charge. Okay, so I was talking about the So Very Easy channel, and as I said, she is definitely a professional. She goes to shows when we could. Pre-COVID, and she demos things, she talks to people and about these kind of things. She uses a sit-down mid-arm machine to quilt on, and she shows you lots of tips on that, how to do that kind of thing. So it's a really good channel, very professionally done. So it's in our show notes. Okay, give me a couple of yours.
Well, actually, when I look for, I don't actually necessarily sit down and just watch YouTube channels for apparel making sewing techniques very
Use your words.
often. So what I use is I usually just do a search on something. So if I'm looking on what like I sew these things called flat felt seams on a lot of my shirts. So,
Say it isn't so.
So I have the technique that the instructor showed us how to do it. But one day I did a search on the internet, and I noticed that there's a lot of other people that have alternate ways of doing the same seam, and they have a few more sewing techniques that were good to watch. That were a little different than what the instructor I have was showing us. So I thought they were good to go to. So one that I found seemed to be really good that showed up in a lot of my searches is one called Made to Sew, MADE to sew. And this lady is very quick. There isn't a lot of introduction or anything. She gets right into what she's going to show. So one of the things was I always get confused between Hong Kong seams and French seams and flat felt seams. So they're good places.
Hong Kong seams.
Yeah,
I've never heard you use that term before.
Well, it's one that I don't know if I've ever sewn it, but yeah, there are different types of seams that you can sew. So these places are good to go. Made to Sew is good to go to for that. There's all kinds of other tips on how to alter patterns and general sewing terms and machine uses and things like that. And it seems to be a really good channel. The second channel that's very similar to that is called Notches. Again, this lady's very concise and shows you a lot of things, but she seems to have a lot more things on her channel that are more geared towards sewing women's clothing or things like bathing suits or stuff like that. So that might be a little bit better for some of the women looking for tips and tricks on how to do certain things, like I guess how to turn skinny straps inside out and things like that. So I found it pretty good as well. So they're my top two.
So you mentioned when you're talking about the first one, the Made to Sew, you're saying about different methods for doing the same thing. And I have found that if you go to YouTube and let's say, well, one time I was trying to figure out how to do mitered corners on borders. I went to one YouTube video, I watched it, and I was completely lost. And I was getting discouraged with this. So I thought, well, no, let's see what other people have. Well, I did a search. I found all kinds of different YouTube channels showing you how to do mitered corners. And I found one that I could understand. The way that they had set it up, the way they did it, made perfect sense to me. So, don't necessarily think you go to a video because you're looking about how to do something and you get discouraged because you went to that video and it wasn't very clear. Find another one. Check it out. I do that all the time to find the best one. And here's a little tip. If you're a regular using YouTube, you can set up private playlists where you can take something that you want to use maybe later on as a reference point. You want to go back and check it again. You can just drop it into that playlist. It's a private playlist if you set it up that way, and it's very easy to set it up, and it's beyond the scope of today's video, but you can figure it out. It's fairly intuitive. And you'll always have it there. You have your own little reference guide. I do that with a variety of different types of topics that I have different playlists for that are private. Now, some people make them public as well. So sometimes if you go to a certain YouTube site, take a look at their playlists. They may have some things there that are related to whatever topic is you're looking for, and you can tap into that. Why reinvent the wheel if someone's already found something that's good and they're sharing it? So, two other sites that I go to a lot. One's the Sewing Room. This lady, she has been sewing for many, many years. She has very clear instructions. She tends to lean towards novelty fabrics, kids or baby quilts or crib quilts, pillows, table runners, placemats. She gears a lot of her videos to ranked beginners, which is good because her instructions are very, very clear. I just don't like the fabric she picks, but that's a personal thing. She buys all her fabric at Joann's and, well, okay.
And Walmart.
And Walmart, yeah. I mean, those, well, one, we don't have Joann's in Canada, and I have been to a Joann's, and I'll have to say I wasn't that impressed by what I saw as far as their fabric quality was concerned. And Walmart, well, I think the Walmarts in the States tend to have bigger departments for fabric.
Yeah, the Walmarts here seem to only have
like a shelf,
a shelf,
a little
of
shelf,
fat
like one.
quarters, and the fabric that they have here tends to be what I consider a lower quality cotton.
Yeah, if you were going to make something like a cheap pillow or dog's bed,
It seems to have a more open weave than a lot of the cottons that we get at our sewing store. So,
and you can't buy it by the meter as such, like get it cut off the bolt. It
they do
comes
sell
pre-cut.
packages here of pre-cut fabrics that are like a meter long or 2 meters long, but they're just stuffed in a roll and stuck in a bin somewhere.
But I think I did mention it's called the sewing room. Right. And another one, and this is another one I'm sure most people know about, but very, very helpful in terms of tutorials, and that's Jordan Fabrics. And every week she does a new quilt design. Now, some of them are free designs because anything that she designs herself, she puts a link up to it, and you can download the complete pattern for nothing. If it is a paid pattern, then she'll give you a link to where you can buy it, which is usually on their site, but you have to buy it. And in those cases, she doesn't give you all the measurements because it's not her pattern to do that. It would be a violation of copyright if she did. But there are tons on their YouTube channel, or sorry, on their website, which is also, I think it's jordanfabrics.com. You go there and go into their section for free patterns. You're going to find all kinds. And there's some really, really nice ones on there. But her tutorials are extremely clear as well. And she gives you tips on making, like how to cut things a little bit easier so you get things straight. Does talk occasionally about tools, but doesn't really ever get much into that. She is very basic when it comes to, you don't need a whole lot of fancy templates and rulers to do the designs that she comes up with. And that's not to say that her designs are simplistic, because they're not. In their appearance, in their construction, they're fairly easy. So again, if you're a beginner quilter, that's a good one to go to get your feet wet. Okay, what else have you got?
Okay, one other place I've got that I didn't talk about last time for our YouTube channel, and this is a lady actually I've gone to a fair bit to see. At first I found her when I was looking for suggestions or topics about how to use a cover stitch machine. And because I bought a cover stitch machine, I wanted to understand a little bit more about it. And she has a whole series of videos that show that. She also has videos that show sergers and how to use them and just some sewing machine techniques. But she also has stuff like different things like seams and how to sew them as well. And I found her to be extremely helpful and extremely detailed as to, for instance, why would you pick one cover stitch machine over another cover stitch machine, and also how to use your cover stitch machine, because they can be a little bit finicky. This isn't necessary for everyone, but she has a lot of videos that are not cover stitch machines, that are just general sewing machines, sergers, and sewing techniques. So I find her very helpful, and it's called The Last Stitch. And I've got Steve the link for it. And the one thing that only comment I have to about her is she has a very unusual accent when she talks. So I'm not sure where I haven't really looked up where she's from.
Is she hard to understand?
I think she's English. No, she's not difficult to understand at all. It's not one of those accents that's difficult. It's just that it sounds more unusual than the I think she may have moved to England from another country, and then she has. But I mean, that's a weird comment to say, but at first it just sounded strange to me the way she was talking, but she is very clear, and she always gets right to the point. That's the other thing with these videos, is that I don't like videos where someone starts talking about their personal life and everything else at the beginning of the video and goes on and on and on before they get to, if I'm looking up how to do a flat felled seam, I want to get somebody to get right to the point and show me how to do a flat felled seam. I don't want to hear about their life history before they get started. And these three, the three that I've put up here, are all ones that are, they give a brief introduction and then they go right into whatever they're talking about.
Yeah, actually, and all the ones that I've given too, what I think makes them good is the fact that, as Walter says, they get right to the point. They don't give you the whole background of their life. I mean, that's fine. If they want to do that and they're combining it as a vlog, that's fine, because that's what vlogs are, right? But when you're looking for something very specific, I know what I do. I watch the first 20 seconds and I can tell right in the first 20 seconds that when they start talking about what they did last week and how they got up to this and that, I turn them off, I go find another one. There might have been some really interesting information in that video, but I couldn't put up with it. I moved on, because when I'm looking for things that I want to be informed about, I want to know right up front, right there, bang, get me into it. So one that's not, it's not one for going to and finding out how to do things, but it's just very, very entertaining. And occasionally, well, more than occasionally, she talks about some of her creations in her quilts. She's an English lady. It's called The Last Homely House. It's a very popular YouTube channel. Kate, who does it, has a very personable personality. And she does things a little bit different when it comes to quilting. As I said, she is an English lady, and these are things possibly she learned. She's, you know, an older lady, and she learned things in one way, and away she goes. But that's not to say she doesn't experiment, because she does. And so I think when I'm looking for inspiration, I'll watch. Well, I watch her every week when she comes on, because I enjoy her videos. But yeah, she's not strictly about sewing and quilting, but she does have that there. Have you got another one?
I don't have another YouTube channel, but I have other links.
Okay. Well, before we go into your links, these are honorable mention because they have nothing to do with quilting, but I watch them as well. And these are YouTube channels that all deal with knitting, and I don't knit. But I have learned a few things. Like some of them talk about dyeing their own wool, and they talk about different types of wool. And they have products that they use in knitting too that I've never heard of before, and I find those all kind of interesting. But I really don't have a great desire to learn how to knit. But one of them that we do like to watch on a regular basis, because it's a bit of a variety. It's not just about wool or just about knitting. It's about wool dyeing, and there's some cooking in it, and then some general, you know, interest things. And these guys are Canadian. They don't live that far away from us, although we've never met them. It's called Cabin Boy Knits. And I think they usually do one every other week or something like that. It might be once a month, but it's pretty good. Fiber Hustle is another one, and Needles at the Ready, Sweet Tea No Shade. These are all knitting channels, and they are all done by gay men. So it might be another reason why I watch them. I don't know. But if you are a knitter, you might want to check these out. There is a whole community of knitters out there. There's tons and tons of YouTube channels about knitting. I don't know. You may hate me for this, but okay, if you've seen one pair of socks, you've seen them all. Socks.
I used to knit a long time ago.
You didn't knit socks, did you? You knitted
No,
sweaters.
I never. I did a few sweaters. I didn't do too many. And then I sort of lost interest in it. I did it because my mom, I always used to watch my mom knit all the time, and I always was fascinated with it and wanted to learn how to do it. So I learned how to do it and made a few sweaters. And at the time, I was wearing a lot of sweaters, so it was kind of nice to make my own.
And you made Icelandic sweaters.
Yeah, well, it was what do you call them? Cable knit sweaters.
Well, yeah, but they're Icelandic too. You made
Yeah, I made
both
it.
of
Yeah.
the
So,
styles.
but
They were always really nice, but we don't wear
I
sweaters
kind of
anymore.
lost interest in doing it because I don't really wear anything that's knitted much anymore. So
And sweaters make you look fat.
yeah, fatter.
Fatter. So we don't need anything else to make us
Yeah.
look fatter.
So they're kind of interested. Actually, I'm kind of interested in watching them because I did have that background where I have knitted in the past, but I'm not really into knitted socks. Maybe I need to learn how to knit another toque.
Well, what I find with these knitting YouTube channels, again, I'm sure someone's going to write me a nasty comment about this, but it's almost like a cult. They have their little groups, they get together and they say, okay, you could probably say the same thing about quilters. But I don't think quilters, of course I'm biased, I don't think quilters are as, I don't want to say enamored, because we are enamored about what we do in quilts and things like that. We're passionate too about it. It's just something about them. They have this language that they use. I mean, you watch, especially Needles at the Ready or that, they're dropping terms, little short forms, 3 per sentence all the time. And you have to be a knitter.
They always talk about a fortnight.
Yeah, well, I think that's just being cute.
Yeah.
But whatever. But I mean, no, they're using knitting terms, but they're short forms. Like DKY or something, finger weight, I don't know, worsted. I mean, I'm not a knitter, so I don't know what these things mean. And they don't explain them. So really, well, that's because their audience is a knitting audience. They're very much involved with that. But anyway, so those are there. Now, you said you've got sites that
I've got just some basic information sites that I've found. Because a lot of times what will happen is that when I'm want to know specific information, I won't necessarily go to YouTube. I'll just do a search on the internet for whatever I'm looking for and then come up with a site. So one of the big things I seem to look for all the time is when I'm selecting fabric, and a lot of the fabric I buy is online these days, is the weight of the fabric. Now, quilting cotton is always pretty consistent as to its weight because these two shirts are made out of quilting cotton. But so I don't really look at that because I just look at it as the fact that it's tight as shirt material. And probably if I was using poplin or there's other shirting material, if it's a shirting material, I probably wouldn't look at the weight so much. So, but when I'm looking for cotton twill or denim or for linen or things like that, I need to know what kind of weight it is. So for the choice of fabric that I'm using, I've recently purchased some linen, and I was told to get 5 to 7 ounce linen, but I was reading more and more about it that really 5 ounce is probably more for my project would be better. But so anyway, so on Apparel Fabrics, I look for the weight of the fabric, and fabric weights are measured in 2 types of weights. It's grams per square meter, or it's ounces per yard. And so you'll run into a website, and sometimes they show it in ounces per yard, and sometimes they show it as grams per square meter. So when I'm looking at 200 grams per square meter, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I need 5 ounces per yard. Is that 5 ounces per yard or not? And I don't know. So I went online and looked for fabric weights conversion charts. And I did find a website that shows me exactly that. They gave me a whole chart that shows me fabric weight by grams per square meter, and then the same by ounces per yard. Of course, there's a formula you can use. They list that as well. So we'll be including that conversion chart link to
it's in the show notes.
So that's very helpful for me. So if I'm looking for a specific weight of fabric, then I can go to that and find it. Or you can just type into Google, what's the ounces of, you put fabric weight 200 GSM equals ounces per yard, and sometimes it'll show up.
Okay, and you've got two other ones on
Yeah, I
here.
have two other ones. The other two are basically, one is beginner sewing terms is actually very good because it shows you pictures of specific sewing terms like back stitching or basting stitch, or the very basic sewing terms. And I find that's very helpful to go to and just look for basic sewing terms because they also show pictures of the stitches that they're trying to portray. So I found that one very good. And there's another one that I found called General Sewing Term Definitions. Now that particular site is not as user-friendly to use, but there's a lot of information there. Everything from like thread weights to needle sizes to sewing apparel or weights, all kinds of other things. So there's a lot of information there that you can find just by reading something like that. So I found that very helpful as well.
Now, would they have quilting terms?
That's a good question. I didn't really specifically look for quilting terms.
But even with the sewing terms alone, even though it may not be specific to quilting kind of a thing, there are crossover between, apparel sewing and quilting. And so it probably doesn't hurt. Because, you hear people use terminology all the time. And if you don't stop somebody and say, what do you mean by that? You should never be afraid to ask that, because there are so many short forms of things. Like for the longest time, I did not know what WOF was. But it kept telling me, cut 2.5-inch strips, WOF, width of fabric. But that still didn't help me because, well, what do you mean width? Well, it's selvage to selvage, okay? But I didn't know that at the time, and I had to look it up.
Yeah, like I kept thinking it's like WTF.
Yeah.
We don't have to explain that.
No. Don't think. Although there are times when you're doing some sewing on some things when it is a WTF.
So no, I don't know where I'm going with that.
I don't know. Senility has struck.
Yeah, there are sewing terms in patterns when you're reading patterns. Like for instance, I for a while I didn't know where the grain line was on fabric and things like that. So and
you have that in quilting too.
That's in patterns too.
Yeah, as well. I was going to say though, when you're doing a search, there's some things to watch out for. And although I think this is pretty obvious to most people who do anything on Google these days, actually maybe it's not. So let's say you're putting in a term, say you put in something like that sewing gauge or something that we were talking about earlier. And right at the very top, the first couple of entries on a Google page, watch out for these. They're clickbait. They are usually companies, and they're trying to sell you products. You may not find anything about that particular term that you put in there, but they have put it in their metadata so that they will rise to the top because they actually pay Google for a list. They pay a lot of money for a list of commonly searched for terms under certain categories. And that's what puts their advertisement to the top. Now, how do you know when it's advertisement? Look in the very left corner of the title of the web page and you will see ad.
Yeah, the other thing I've noticed is not necessarily that companies, it doesn't necessarily be an ad. Companies will pay Google to present their company first in a search, and it may not say ad on it. No. And if you're looking for a specific fabric company or something like that, and you may actually find in the you do your Google search and you think, okay, that company is the first one on the list, and you click on it, then you find out it's not the company you're looking for. Then later realize that it's like about 3 or 4 companies down is the one that you want, really. So they float all these things to the top for Google, and it may not have what you're looking for in it. Or they sometimes play tricks on you to think that that's actually the company you're going to. Yeah. So you got to really watch out for that.
And the other thing too to note is most people do not go beyond the first page of a search because Google has created in the mindset, in order to get people to pay for their placement, as Walter's been saying, on, you know, where they're being placed in the hierarchy on their page. The more they pay, the higher up they get. Well, people are lazy. But that doesn't mean that if it's not listed, what you're looking for isn't listed on the first page, that there isn't a valuable site on the second page or the third page or the fourth page. We're impatient people. We don't like to spend a lot of time looking through things. But you know, if you're really trying to find something and get the best answer for it, you may have to do that. Plus, it doesn't hurt to compare information because, as I said, there's a lot of clickbait. People are trying to sell you products. So, you know, if you're in doubt, compare a couple of sites to get the real story out of it. I mean, we all know that's how the news works, right?
Like, I mean, I've put in like fabric weight conversion charts, and then I find out that the first couple that are on the list are actually companies that are trying to sell me fabric or something like that. They have nothing really to do with fabric conversion charts or anything like that, and or they may have it really far embedded in their website to the point where all they're doing is trying to sell you products up front.
Yeah. So you do have to be somewhat discriminatory and aware when you're doing a search. I mean, go back to the old days when we used to have to do research in libraries.
Yeah.
You went to several sources, right? Well, it's the same with either on YouTube, because YouTube does the same thing. Well, YouTube is owned by Google, so it's the same procedure.
If I don't like what's in my search, my original search, I may change the search up a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes that helps too. And sometimes you have to give it more terms. And I've often found it's very helpful if you just write it as a question. How do I do a Hong Kong seam? And oftentimes you get the answer. So it can be just that easy to look for it too. But just beware of, you know, the quality of the information, where it's coming from, all that kind of stuff, and the tricks that Google have up their sleeve for you as well. Okay, so those were the things we want to talk about. There are many, many more we could talk about because we're constantly on the search for information and that kind of thing. But if you have something that you like that we haven't mentioned, then send it to us and we'll check it out and we'll report back on to what we have found on that particular site. So please give us some things like that. And also give us some topics for future episodes, or so Chatty may go the way of the dodo. Bye-bye. So, anything, parting words, anything you want to say?
Nope, I'm pretty good.
Okay, so that's it for us today. I hope you found this useful, and I hope you do something creative this week, and you have a good week, and we'll see you next week for the next episode, hopefully, of So Chatty. Bye for now. Say goodbye, Walter.
Bye.